I had to check on this because I actually missed a little bit of the press conference yesterday. But there was in the comments, there's kind of a little back and forth with Rosemarie Laguatnia, kind of talking about the quarantine protocols that the governor had talked about yesterday during the press conference. But I missed this. I did not see, as Chamarita Regis comments in, governor needs to really clarify things if she is rating herself as a 1. And so this is a story by Nestor Lecanto. 1 year later, Governor Liu gives herself a top grade for the handling of the COVID pandemic. Her administration began a news conference today with a self-produced video summarizing the events of the past year and explaining how this administration responded. KUAM News asked the Gov how she would rate that response and if she would do anything differently, to which she replied, I think we adjusted quickly. I think we're flexible. I think people in my team, they were united. They're very cooperative. They're very supportive. And we were leading with participative input and ideas from people. So no, I don't regret any of the decisions we made, and I rate it an A+. So that's what that was about. I missed that. Did you guys, the governor, rate himself too, Kev?
Morning, Chris. Morning, Bree.
Good morning.
And, I think just this pandemic has been tough on all of us. I think when it comes to just the government responses on both islands, we've had to dim it down, adjust arbitrarily, and do everything that was necessary to protect the islands, protect the Marianas for that matter. So at the end of the day, I think, public scrutiny is going to be an important part of the job, but at the end of the day, decisions had to be made in order to keep people safe in the best way possible with as little playbook as possible.
So that's a no, Governor Ralph didn't grade himself.
I'm not going to say that he necessarily didn't grade himself. I think that his performance speaks for himself. I think the having proactive measures put in place, his leadership, his communication with our Commonwealth Healthcare Corporation, the leadership of our task force chairman, Warren Villagomez, our territorial health officer, Esther Munia, chief executive officer for CHCC. A lot of people doing a lot of good work, a lot of good people doing a lot of good work in the CNMI to get us where we're at. And, with the news of us breaking our record of 203 straight days of no community transmission, I think that our focus remains the same, is continuing that good work to get us back to a COVID-free CNMI.
Okay, and then speaking of the record that you guys broke, definitely not one that you guys would want to break. But having said that, can you just kind of take us back to Friday and go over the chronology of how all of this happened to where we are today with 10 new cases in the CNMI?
Definitely, thank you, Bree. So to take you back to Friday, so the CNMI identified our 147th case, which was a frontliner who was fully vaccinated. This individual was of course, being a frontliner, you're always at risk in your line of work. Our frontliners are always at risk. They're taking the sacrifice to help keep our community safe. So it's always unfortunate to see someone on the front line, to see someone on the front line receive this type of or be impacted by the virus. But then moving forward from Friday, when we identified the first case on Friday at 5 p.m. The individual was asymptomatic, was not showing any symptoms, and completed the COVID-19 vaccination. And by 10 p.m., our expanded contact tracing identified 10 high-risk contacts and was transported to our quarantine facility. Then on Saturday, we at 8 a.m., we conducted testing for all 10 of those contacts, inclusive of the use of redundant testing platforms. So we wanted to make sure that we were identifying positive cases in the right way. We were using multiple testing platforms to ensure that these high contacts were identified. And then from there, we found that there were 3 additional cases related to case 147. So we continue to expand our contact tracing investigation through CHC and the task force. And then it led to a 10 additional high risk contacts. So just to provide context, Chris and Bree, that when I mentioned these contacts, the contact tracing, that term that's being floated around since the beginning of the pandemic, these contacts are not necessarily positive cases. These are people just within the investigation that are brought in, isolated, and quarantined to make sure that we keep everyone who may have been potentially exposed to the virus away from the community. And that's always been the focus of our response. CHEC and the task force, making sure that we do our part to keep people who have been closely associated with someone who has had the virus away from the community. And as simple as that sounds, that fundamental job of keeping people who have been close to the virus away from the community has kept us safe.
Kev, let me just get in here. So you're saying that in this case, patient 0 was a fully vaccinated frontline medical worker who contracted the COVID virus but was asymptomatic?
Yeah, it was asymptomatic. The virus protects people from not producing a severe illness, but not infection necessarily. So that's one of the things that we're continuing to look at this much closely. We're continuing to receive guidance from the CDC regarding this matter. But at the end of the day, this doesn't stop the work of getting our community vaccinated.
So 147, the fully vaccinated individual, it's a medical worker?
No, it was not a medical worker.
Okay.
It was an individual who was present at our quarantine facility, frontline worker at our quarantine facility.
Okay. And how long had this individual been vaccinated?
I do not have his vaccination, his or her vaccination schedule at the top of my head, but the individual was vaccinated before exposure to the virus.
So the individual was asymptomatic. What led to this individual being tested if he or she was asymptomatic?
No, the individual was identified through outbound travel testing. So I'm sorry. Let me track it back. I'm sorry, Bree. So the positive case that was found first was an individual who was identified through outbound travel testing. So it was a traveler who exposed a frontline worker within the quarantine facility. Then the person in the quarantine facility, who was then exposed through the contact tracing, then was tested, and then that's where we found the positive case within the community and the spread within the current community cluster that we're talking about right now, which is 10 individuals who have been positive since Friday within this community cluster related to case 0, so to speak.
So the other 9 that tested positive, were they also asymptomatic?
The other 9, most of them were asymptomatic. Going back to our last situational report, there was one who was exhibiting some symptoms, but ended up having no symptoms later on through the observation process.
Were the other 9 also fully vaccinated?
I do not have that information on me. So these individuals, regardless of their vaccinated or not, through the contact tracing and through the quarantine procedures, we have isolated them away, isolated them safely away from.
And 147, the first one that tested positive, do you know which vaccination or vaccine they received? Was it Moderna or Pfizer?
I do not have the specific vaccine for this specific program. No, I don't.
And the other nine, were they also working at the quarantine facility?
No. The other 9 were identified through the contact tracing. These individuals who were either living with the individual who received the initial contact, and then certain other high risk contacts within found through the contact tracing investigation. Identified 10 additional individuals who have tested positive so far.
Kev, did you? I'm not sure if you had talked about this, but is there a possibility about schools shutting down because of a student being linked to the positive case?
That's a good question, Chris. So a lot of the measures that have happened on island over the last couple of days includes the fact that our public school system has shut down face-to-face instruction for the next 2 weeks. Commissioner Dr. Alfred Atta issued out a memo stating that PSS individuals and staff and teachers will be practicing home quarantine as well as shutting down face-to-face classes, and will be reverting into an online-only format. Most of our other educational institutions have provided that option as well, but not all schools have stopped face-to-face. Just as well as the government not shutting down completely face-to-face interactions as well. We're gonna what we're doing here in the CNMI is we're dimming it down in a way where we're ensuring that the policies put in place allows us to mitigate against additional spread, but at the same time too, if we don't see any widespread community spread, which is what CHEC is communicating with the task force and the governor, we're not going to be in implementing another lockdown, so to speak, like we did back in August when we identified 2 community cases. Because right now, the CNMI has the tools and the personnel in place to keep everyone safe, to keep the individuals who have been exposed to the virus away from the community and safely in quarantine as they recover.
So how many of the 10 are children?
I do not have that information specifically.
I'm pretty sure you saw this email that's circulating around from Ron Snyder, headmaster of the Saipan International School. Kev?
Yeah, of course. So Ron Snyder is the private school representative on the Board of Education. What that communication entails is the fact that CHEC informed the Board of Education and Public about the identification of the virus. At the end of the day, that information that Ron was sharing was privileged information until we were able to put in additional measures to identify these individuals found at specific sites around island, and then be able to implement a policy accordingly. So, Ron Snyder is an administrator within one of our schools. He was just trying to do his job, but at the end of the day, I think the focus remains the same within the CNMI. We want to be able to work together as a community, within the school side, our public health side, as well as the government side. So any information that we're looking at around the community, going back to what the governor has mentioned in the press conference that we had on Saturday, which is we're trying to stop the spread of misinformation. That's been a big thing that's happening around the island over the course of the weekend. Understandably so, because of this new community transmission. But again, we're telling people in the community that we are fine, we are safe still. That's been the message that's been the consistent message. We are still safe. We still have the tools and the personnel in place to keep everyone safe and to continue providing the opportunities for people to get vaccinated and tested accordingly.
Kebza, what's the community feeling there? Because you guys have been smooth sailing for, 200 plus days, and then boom, not one case, not two cases, 10 cases. I'm just thinking that if I'm in the CNMI, I'm kind of like, whoa, did we let our guard down? What happened here? Too much hee hee ha ha. What's your messaging? Are you pivoting on the messaging? You're kind of like, hey guys, you still got to do the things that you got to do, or what?
Yes, the messaging has been ramped up. We're really ramping up on telling people to exercise the 3 Ws: washing your hands, watching your distance, wearing your mask, practicing proper hand hygiene to minimize the spread, and to get vaccinated when it's available to you. We've also ramped up. We also have re-implemented surveillance testing within our community to give people the option that if they're feeling like they were exposed to someone who came into contact with the virus, that they would be able to get tested as well. But to answer your question, Chris, like fully, in terms of like the overall feeling within the community, people are understandably concerned. But for us, the biggest focus that we're putting out there is that that we have to just continue to be vigilant, and we have to continue to focus on making sure that we do everything we can to get over this small community cluster and then move forward. And as Governor Torres mentioned, the spread of misinformation is just as dangerous as the virus itself, and that we are confident that we'll be able to overcome this.
Just for clarification, this viral message by Mr. Snyder about the Garapan Elementary School student testing positive, is this part of the 10?
I'm not going to confirm specific individuals within the 10 cases in terms of if it's a student or not. PSS has not disclosed that as well, and the governor's office and CHSC will not disclose if it's a teacher or a student. It is a member of the public school system, but we will continue to ensure that any persons that have been identified will be isolated and quarantined accordingly.
Okay, we had a comment here. What is the website on info regarding COVID guidelines? I have family members who are flying to Saipan coming from London.
So your question is where do they find COVID-19 guidelines?
Or I guess just if you're flying to Saipan from London, maybe what are the protocols?
So the quarantine protocols are on the governor's website. That's governor.gov.mp. If you click on the blue link that's provided at the top of the page, you'll see that there's a travel form. You'll see the quarantine procedures. In actuality, we've actually been working on revising our directive to revise our quarantine procedures for people who have been vaccinated. But right now, the priority is to focus on this current community cluster. So that our quarantine procedures may be tabled, but then to answer that person's question about where the current quarantine procedures are, they're on the governor's website, governor.gov.mp. They'll be able to access the proper procedures for any non-residents who are wishing to go to the CNMI. But if it's a returning resident, then that information is provided as well.
How many total people at this point have been identified as close contacts and have been isolated away from the community? And out of that number, has everyone been tested?
Yes. So we have about a little over 50 individuals within the expanded contact tracing. They've all been tested, and they've all been safely isolated away from the community. The individuals who have been isolated are going through the routine process of testing, to your question, Bree. So yes, they have been tested, and they will continue to be monitored throughout the quarantine process and until determined that they did not contract the virus and will therefore be released from quarantine.
Has anyone been hospitalized?
No, not at all. No one has been hospitalized. which is a welcoming sign. No one has been hospitalized. People have just been at the quarantine facility. There are medical care staff on site. So if needed, the option is always there. But so far, no specific hospitalization.
Okay.
Did anyone get mad at you because you keep coming on the link talking about how great you guys are doing? And now your community streak is over?
I mean, we're not gonna necessarily.
I got it.
I wanted to move on to what is the status now with reopening tourism in the CNMI.
That's a great question. To be honest with you, the reopening plan hasn't stopped. Us pursuing reopening has not stopped. The Governor's Council of Economic Advisors, in conjunction with the Marianas Visitors Authority, our partner agencies, our regional partners, as well as our tourism partners in our source markets, that those conversations have not stopped. This is a community cluster. Yes, it is something to be concerned about, but then this has been something that we have continually worked on to mitigate against if it were to happen. So we weren't going to say that community transmission was going to be going on for the rest of the pandemic. The community transmission would have been not a thing for the rest of the pandemic. We wanted to make sure that even with community transmission, albeit just a small community cluster, we're going to continue the work of reopening our economy, keeping everyone, giving people an opportunity to get back into a sense of normalcy with their jobs. Our tourism industry, our domestic economy, has been enthusiastic and is excited about the prospect of us continuing to pursue the reopening of tourism, while also making sure that our small businesses get the help they need, both through our local government as well as through federal assistance that we're continuing to pursue. With the signing of the American Rescue Plan, a lot of federal assistance is going to be coming into the CNMI on top of a lot of federal assistance that we've had over the last couple of years since the typhoons in 2018. So the work continues in terms of getting people the help they need, the stimulus checks, the paycheck protection program, a lot of these business loans that are going to be coming in, unemployment assistance, or the third iteration of pandemic unemployment assistance under this. Our agencies have been locked in to continue this work, and we're going to continue to pursue reopening in a way that we know how, that we've been doing, that we've been deliberate about, and we look forward to hopefully getting a response soon from South Korea.
Okay, so we're still waiting for the written, I guess, agreement from South Korea. Okay.
Yes.
Where are you guys with achieving herd immunity?
In terms of achieving herd immunity, we are doing well in our vaccination rates, but do not have the vaccination numbers right now. But I can circle back and get those and get back to you about that. But so far, our vaccination rate has been going strong. We've been making sure that people within phases 1A and 1B receive the opportunity to get vaccinated, and not just get vaccinated with one dose. We are giving them we are making sure that 2 doses are dedicated for every single person who has a confirmed appointment with the Commonwealth Healthcare Corporation. That's our biggest focus, particularly with Pfizer and Moderna, since those are 2-dose vaccines. We're not going to rely on one dose for those vaccines when it has without CDC approval. So that's our focus. Johnson & Johnson vaccines are making its way here to the CNMI. CHCC has made an initial order of about 400 Johnson & Johnson vaccines. But we do have a large vaccine supply to continue vaccinating folks in phases 1A and 1B, and we've expanded vaccination to folks under 50 years old.
Okay. Well, thanks.
Yeah, Kev, thank you.
Anything you wanted to get out?
No, just think, again, Bree, Chris, thank you so much for the platform, and to communicate with our constituents in the CNMI and family and loved ones excuse me, constituents in Guam and family and loved ones in Guam. I think that the messaging of One Marianas remains true within this pandemic. The CNMI is going through its own version of dealing with community spread once again. But to the listeners and to the loved ones on Guam, rest assured that Governor Torres, CEO Munya, Task Force Chairman Warren Gomez, and our task force and our first responders are doing everything we can to keep your family and loved ones in the CNMI safe. Chris, you talked about about the governor giving himself a grade about the response. The CNMI is very proud of our COVID-19 response, and while we have this community cluster, we're going to be able to get back to that point again of working hard to get us back to no community transmission. So we're going to continue to keep everyone updated as best we can, and work with our media partners to ensure that that this process is done well, and that we keep people safe within the islands. Thank you both so much, as always.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.
And good luck.
Yeah, good luck.
Stay safe.
Wash your hands, wear your mask, watch your distance. One Marianas. There you go. Kevin Bautista from the CNMI Governor's Office.